From the European Parliament in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have on the program: Reinventing Europe. Emmanuel Macron calls for an EU renaissance and warns that never has Europe been in such danger. Huawei war. Mobile phones get political in the battle for 5G, with Europe caught in the middle. About time. What an MEP decision to scrap seasonal clock changes could mean for Europe. Gender battle. Ahead of International Women's Day, we talked to the head of the UN General Assembly about equality. And Trump unplugged, the best one-liners from the U.S. president's epic 2-hour speech. All right, it is time to meet our panelists this evening. We have, of course, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor at Euronews. Darren, which of these stories are you watching?
I think it has to be Huawei and this incredible battle, a global battle we're seeing between China, essentially, in the United States about the future of 5G. And you might think 5G, we've got 4G, it's not that big a deal. 5G is revolutionary, and whoever wins this war may well set the technological agenda for the next century.
Probably wins the future. All right, also joining us tonight, Christine Revaud-Dallon-Bonnefoy. She's a French MEP from the Socialists and Democrats group. What about you, Christine?
Well, Macron, evidently, because I was so astonished by the title of his editor saying Renaissance, which is a word we use in the Socialist Party, and which was the meeting François Hollande, when he was campaigning for the presidential in 2012, used.
So you're surprised that Macron is using this?
Just as before, he's copying what he thinks is good.
All right, we'll talk more about that very soon. All right, we are also joined tonight by Peter Lundgren. He is a Swedish MEP from the European Conservative and Reformist group at the Parliament. What about you, Peter?
Well, reinventing Europe sounds exciting. I don't really see a need of reinventing something that is already there, so that is an interesting topic.
It's Emmanuel Macron's speech there. All right, and that is where we begin tonight. Learn from the Brexit trap and reform. That is the impassioned message from French President Emmanuel Macron to kickstart his European election campaign. Macron's open letter appeared in 28 newspapers across all EU member states, and in it, he laid out a series of proposals for a, quote, Europe Renaissance, as you were talking about earlier, and called on the EU to make fundamental changes on migration, defence and corruption. Now, he also warned about the rise of nationalism and, well, Brexit. Macron said, quote, never since the Second World War has Europe been so essential, yet never has Europe been in so much danger. Brexit stands as the symbol of that. Now, he went on to say as well, quote, the trap is not being part of the European Union. The trap is in the lies and the responsibility that can destroy it. Who told the British people the truth about their post-Brexit future? All right, let's discuss what Emmanuel Macron is saying. He's clearly laying out his battle cry for the European parliamentary elections. He says Europe is in danger. Never has it been in more danger than in the Second World War. He wants to protect Europe, save Europe from populists, from nationalism, populists like your political party has been described as. Do you agree with this? Europe is in danger.
No, I would present Macron as a danger for Europe. He is the Prime Minister of France, a member state in the European Union, and yet he wants to give all the powers to a suprastate, like the European Union, that will be the ones who are deciding everything happening in the country. And this is pretty much the way Macron has been from the beginning. He started out in the French elections by saying, just vote for me, I will give everyone everything. Not a problem. Well, look at France now.
Well, that's what he says populists are doing, promising everything.
Yeah, but he is doing it. Look at the streets in France. That's the problem.
You fault him for it, but populists are doing it.
No, not at all. When we are saying we want to have more power to the member states, that is not populism. That is realism, of course, that the elected government in each country should have the final saying of their own country. That is realism. That is not populism.
That is an election battle. That's an idea. You know, it's not a certainty. It's an idea. You espouse one political view. He's simply trying to appeal for voters who may well want a deeper, more federal, more integrated European Union.
Christine, I would go to you.
Well,
do you agree that Europe needs saving, first of all?
Well, I think Europe needs democracy. And I think is absolutely not federal because he's really supporting the fact that member states, the Council, support Europe, but not the European Parliament. Is in a form of intergovernmentalism position, but it's not democracy. What I want to say about what he said, just as usual, when Emmanuel Macron speaks about Europe or writes about Europe, it's good, but the acts are so different. We have Dr. Emmanuel and Mr. Macron, and the problem is there. This is the gap between what he says and what he does. An example, asylum package, the refugee. He says we have to be stronger in Europe to welcome refugees, but all the French ports were closed when the boats were arriving around the coast. So where is the...
So you don't think he's the savior of Europe at all? You don't agree with that?
No, he's not.
All right.
This is the people and this is parties and this is democracy. Not one man can't be the solution.
And,
I really hate the fact that we could find a man as a savior.
I mean, clearly he's laying this out because of what not just Macron, but a lot of countries, politicians in the European Union worry about populists and nationalists winning in the European parliamentary elections. Is it a little bit too little, too late at this point to be, having this battle cry and taking
not really,
votes
because
from them?
I think most voters only start to turn their attention to elections kind of as it draws closer. And this clearly is a pitch, some would say, using
But it feels
the presidency of
disingenuous,
France.
doesn't it? Like, now you're listening after all the problems that we've had for the last few years.
Well, but it's not just a pitch, I think, to voters in France. It's a pitch to voters in Europe. I mean, but what is interesting, he would argue that he is listening because not only was he focusing on kind of liberty and the necessity to protect democracy against foreign influence and foreign money, but there was a very, very telling aspect to the speech, which is about protectionism. That clearly people in Europe feel insecure at the moment, not necessarily, particularly around the issue of migration. And he latched onto that, flipped it around instead of saying what Viktor Orban and populists would say on the right, that actually nation states need to protect their own borders. He says that Europe needs to protect its external border, but ultimately the solution to asylum seekers and to migration is on a European level.
I mean,
now, as I said, that is a pitch to voters.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, will it win through? Well, I think there is an electorate out there, a section of European society who actually do want more Europe, who do want a deeper sense of the European Union. And that may well appeal, this message.
I mean, we're going to go into the detail of what Macron was saying, but for now, after we've heard Emmanuel Macron's vision, we do want to know what European citizens think and what do they think of his plans. Let's talk to Alex Morgan in the Cube, who has this part of the story for us. Alex?
Well, Tessa, have a look at this. French, of course, then we go into Estonian, Latvian, Slovenian. We keep going down the list. I don't normally talk from paper, but this was how Emmanuel Macron got his message out on social media. In all these languages, here the English. You can see how many there were, posts in every language of the EU. Citizens of Europe, the president said, I am addressing you because time is of the essence. Now, of course, Macron often described as a saviour of Europe, wasn't he, when he was elected? So how did this message go down? Well, for some, this roadmap cemented Macron's status as the saviour. Look at this. This is from an Estonian researcher. She says here, the fact this letter is published in the EU's official languages shows both the ambition but also the surprising humility in Macron's attempt to reach all the citizens and member states. So a sense here that Macron is leading the way, bringing people together. And it's not just ordinary citizens. These words, this praise echoed right at the top. The EU Council President, Donald Tusk, praising Macron, calling again, using this phrase, European Renaissance. But there isn't everybody who thinks Emmanuel Macron, is the man to lead a European Renaissance. The figure of Emmanuel Macron. There has been quite a lot that's happened since his election, let us not forget. This Polish researcher making a joke here about the Gilets jaunes, 16 weeks of protests don't go unnoticed in other countries, saying here, well, if Macron's going to be taking on this European role, the joke here is the yellow vest will become a pret-a-porter, like a ready-to-wear across the continent. a fashion staple. Obviously, making light of it here. But some people saying, look, you've got domestic problems. What are you doing this EU vision for? But of course, that is one voice, many people saying that. There are other people as well, though, in France, like the socialists, for example. Olivier Faure here, he is a political opponent of Macron, of course, but says Macron is almost like an illusionist. He is using big words to hide a lack of action, saying here that while Macron is talking up this collective, inclusive, progressive Europe, he's not acting on it. It's just words, the idea that Macron isn't the man to actually drive change. And then there are those saying, no, Macron's got the wrong vision for Europe. Let's just bring you up here. Christopher Hope, he's a Telegraph journalist. He's also a Brexit supporter in the UK, saying this letter is precisely why people voted Brexit. This idea of a European project as opposed to an economic union is what drove people to the exit door. Darren was talking about it there. Do people want more Europe? Christopher says no, and Macron is therefore feeding the kind of divisions at the centre of Brexit. And just finally, there are then those socialist voices saying that no, do not trust Macron. He himself, this account here calling him a neoliberal banker, taking us rearranging deck chairs on the sinking Titanic. The idea that Europe should not shackle itself more to neoliberalism, in the words of this account, but to other agendas. So the question is Macron on the right page? Is he the right man to deliver it? And is this the right vision? Obviously, voters across Europe will be deciding very soon indeed.
We're going to see a whole range of different voices there. Thank you, Alex, and our team in the Cube. Now, in addition to warning about populism, Macron also proposed several EU reforms. He said he wants to establish a European agency for the protection of democracies to guard against cyber attacks and ban foreign powers from funding EU parties. He also called for the overhaul of the Schengen area and the creation of a Europe-wide border force and asylum office. And he proposed a European minimum wage appropriate to each country, guaranteeing the same pay in the same workplace. All right, when we look at those proposals, I mean, especially when it comes to migration, it's still a big issue. Don't you think he's taking a book out of the taking a leaf, out of the populist book there?
On the migration issue, just like I said, we have an asylum package on the table, voted by the European Parliament and waiting for the Council. So even France, even Macron and his government to say, OK, we will work on this asylum package. And he didn't do anything about it. When the boats were on the Mediterranean coast, French coast, he didn't allow the boats to welcome them. On another topic, which is on his tribune, is about the trade agreements. The international trade agreement. He says we have to protect our social and environmental norms, right? So why was he in favor of the CETA, of the trade agreement with Japan, and to work with it? It's not relevant. It's not credible between what he writes and what he said. So this is a real issue. And we have a problem because everyone says he's a savior in front of the populist. But we have democracy. We have left parties and we have right parties. He's clearly on the right parties.
Which part of that do you not agree with? I mean,
I don't, that man, I mean, he is the one you should actually be calling populist here. He is trying to sell a message no one wants. He made a failure of himself.
Don't you agree with stricter borders? Don't you agree with that?
Yeah, that is one of the things that is good. But look at what he has done in France. After he came into position as the prime minister, it's a mess all over the country. Now he wants to sell the same idea to the rest of Europe. No, thank you, Mr. Macron. Stay home.
So why is En Marche ahead in the polls again? Why are they the most popular party in France? Where are the socialists in France? How are they doing in the opinion polls?
Well, we are proposing, and some of our proposals were in this text, but we are acting like it in the European Parliament on our votes, contrary to he and contrary to the group is supporting, the ALDE group. So we are just coherent, is not. The problem with Emmanuel Macron is his credibility between what he says and what he does. And if you see, and if you look at the papers of a French newspaper here in Brussels, who knows what he's been saying in France and what he's been doing here in Brussels, they know there's a big difference.
Well, all I would add to that is that despite, 2 or 3 months of protests, despite the fact that he's an incumbent, Mélenchon is still ahead in the polls in France. Ahead of Marine Le Pen's party, ahead of the Socialists.
It's not an election.
Well, we shall see that, but the Socialists, a bit like the centre-left across Europe, are on the decline.
Just last, I'll give you the last one. We don't have much time, but I want to say Macron is warning against populists again. Are populists worried?
No, not at all.
Are you scared of Macron?
No, Mr. Macron, I'm not scared of you.
Oh, there you go. On that note, all right, let's move on. Because Emmanuel Macron, he's not the only one with his eye on the European elections. Because here in Brussels and beyond, the campaign is heating up. Here's the ballot buzz with all the latest. With less than 80 days to go until the European Parliament elections, the EPP's candidate for Commission President, Manfred Weber, is launching a so-called listening tour as part of his campaign. Starting in Greece, it will crisscross Europe before ending up in Munich. Interesting, no stops are planned for Hungary, which is currently locked in a war of words with the EPP. Here's a former Trump strategist who came to Europe vowing to create a right-wing supergroup. But Steve Bannon's plans have reportedly been scaled back. According to Politico, a landmark summit has been postponed. And his man in Europe, Mikhail Mondekanen, has reportedly told the news site Bannon has been a little too optimistic on what we were able to achieve. Meanwhile, in Poland, perhaps more bad news for Eurosceptics. The latest seat projections for the European Parliament show the country's new pro-EU alliance narrowly leading the ruling Law and Justice Party by 1 point. Another sign of the high stakes and the tight race to come. I love how everyone's talking about a listening tour these days. Like, oh, we didn't listen to the people. Like, now we're actually listening. So do you think centrists have a chance now? We're seeing maybe a swing? I don't know, I'll ask you both.
It's too late to start to listen now. He should have been listening to the people's voices from the beginning. But that is typical of this house. They live in a bubble. They don't think they need to take in the reality from outside this house. And now we are coming up to the campaigning period. And now, yes, we want to hear what the people are saying. Why didn't you listen before?
Yeah, and very quickly, I mean, you see Poland, a little bit of pro-EU there, and then Estonia, we just had elections there, and you have a centrist. Is it good for centrists? Still a chance?
I'm not aware. What I'm concerned is about the left. Okay. And I just want you to remind you that in Europe, in pro-European family, it's a very big family, but you have from the left and you have from the right. And what I'm concerned about is the left groups and how we can gather to have a big alliance in the next election. This is my
your focus. I mean, what's really interesting is so tight that the elections are coming, and we probably would not know until we know. All right. As you were saying, starting yesterday, every day this week here at Euronews, we're looking at the big issues surrounding gender equality in the run-up to International Women's Day. And who better to speak about that than the President of the United Nations General Assembly, Maria Fernanda Espinosa. And Darren, actually, you did speak to her earlier today.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, there have only been 4 female presidents of the UN General Assembly. It is a glass ceiling that has been really broken. And she is a senior politician. She is in Brussels today. And as you said, I had a chance to catch up with her and talk to her about what it's like being a senior woman in global affairs. What more can you do? What more can the United Nations do to try and get more women involved in politics, whether it's in Europe or indeed elsewhere?
I think we are in the spaces of decision-making that we are now, because we fought for it. So we deserve to be where we are. That's the number one. The number two is, if you look at the world, only 20 female presidents and prime ministers. I don't know, I think it's the 4%. So I think we need to do better.
So do you think there's more fighting to be done?
I think, of course. I mean, nothing was given to us as a gift. We fought for the spaces where we are now. And there is a lot to do in terms of looking at, for example, violence against women in politics, young generations. And I talk a lot with young people, young women, very intelligent, very committed. But they say, I am I don't want to go there. I'm afraid that they're going to make fun of me. They're going to, and that's the reason why on the 12th of March I have invited women presidents to come to New York and share their own personal experiences. How is that they struggle to get to become president, prime minister? What are the obstacles, but also what are the gains, and how they can share their own personal experience with young female leaders. This is going to happen 12th of March in New York.
So why do you then think that the public, both men and women, are electing essentially strongmen? You know, whether it's a topless Vladimir Putin in Russia, Bolsonaro in Brazil, Duterte in the Philippines, Donald Trump in the United States, almost kind of macho-type men that seem to be appealing to electorates across the world. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that society sometimes are not ready. And if they are not ready, it's because we need to do some more work there. And there is...
Including with female voters.
Including with female voters. Machismo does not only come from men. Discrimination does not only come from men. Violence against women in politics comes sometimes from women themselves. And they cannot separate. I'm a politician myself, and believe me that I have my own personal stories. The toughest are females that are in the opposition. Women against women in a way, and I think that these issues have to be said, have to be put on the table, and this is the kind of conversation we should have, and make sure that the younger generations, they are really committed to make the difference in politics.
And just last question, do you then get angry when you hear people like Viktor Orban, where only, I think, less than 10% of MPs in Hungary are women, who says that politics isn't for women, that they're too delicate to deal with the aggressiveness of politics? Does that make you angry?
I think that we still, have stereotypes from the past, and we have proven we have proven over and over again that we are capable of performing as well or sometimes better than men do. That's my personal experience being Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs for twice, and now having the privilege to preside over the most democratic, universal, norm-setting body of the planet, which is the United Nations General Assembly. So we can prove that we can make the difference when giving the space we deserve.
All right, I'd go to you, Christine, for this as a female politician. I mean, picking up on what one thing she said over there, do you think, we always talk about the men's role, but do you think women are also holding other women back today?
Yes, so sometimes they are still doing it, but it's not a female issue. It's an issue for men and women. And what is interesting now is that everything is taking care of it, and not only women, even if we are the first to struggle for more gender equality. But we can find some women who does this too, of course.
And for men's role in increasing parity between men and women, what would men's contribution be as politicians?
Well, I have so many female colleagues in this house and home. In my home country now, Sweden is a very strong country for women.
Sure.
But I would say a female colleague in this house is just as tough to deal with for me as a male politician than anyone else.
But do you acknowledge it can be harder for women?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
But it's easier here in the European Parliament. I mean, I'm talking from a French point of view. I know my colleagues from Assemblée nationale or Sénat in France, it's really more difficult than it can be for us here, because the point of view of men here, elected here, and because of Swedish and Danish history, we are lucky here, but we have to help.
So that's why national parliaments actually, national politics, it does actually.
And just
finally,
so
different.
It goes beyond. Something we were talking about this last night about having mandatory kind of instruments in place to ensure that there is more representation of women here. It clearly goes beyond even institutions like the European Parliament, and it's about trying to change societal attitudes. And that's everyone's attitudes, men and women, about elected politicians, because clearly at the moment, particularly in more conservative countries, there is still an attitude and an uncomfortableness about electing female politicians.
True, and men and women alike, I guess we're still used to seeing men in suits walking around in all these top places. All right, coming up on Raw Politics, a lot more. Time's up for seasonal time changes. MEPs vote to scrap the biannual shift, plus fighting for 5G domination. How the US and China are locked in an increasingly ugly battle with Europe caught in the middle. Don't go away. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, if you didn't think your phone could be politicized, well, you do think again, because the battle for 5G is on, and caught in the middle, it's Europe. That's because the rush to build infrastructure for the high-speed network is on, and Huawei can supply it, but the U.S. is trying to stop the Chinese tech giant in the name of global security. Now, today, another step forward for Huawei. The company opened a cybersecurity center in Brussels. The move is no doubt aimed at appeasing growing concerns in Europe and those warnings from the U.S., which says Huawei's links to the Chinese government are just too close for comfort. And with me to discuss this in the studio, we have William Dartmouth, a British independent MEP with the EFDD Group. We have Sam Stolten joining us. He is a reporter with Euractiv, and still with us, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. All right, it's becoming such a big battle. Let's lay out the stakes here. Why are the stakes so high? I think you mentioned this earlier, Darren. I'll go to you, Sam, for this. What is the fight really about?
Well, it's essentially about Huawei's cybersecurity track record. And what the US is saying is that Huawei cannot be trusted with regards to their 5G equipment across Europe.
What about control of 5G, though? This is, the battle between China and the US in this, because it seems like a much bigger battle than that.
Yes, so they've been kicked out of the US markets. From the federal US agencies aren't allowed to use Huawei equipment in their communications networks. Australia don't use Huawei equipment either. And this is all part of the bigger US-Chinese trade war going on at the moment. But the point we need to remember is Washington still haven't provided any evidence at all as to these allegations of state-sponsored spying.
And why is it important, as you were saying, who controls this?
Well, it's supposed to understand, electricity is important, will continue to be important, but 5G will become almost as important in the sense that this is a leap from 4G to 5G is revolutionary, not evolutionary. Sure. It is going to be incredibly important. And so, understandably, there is this
because you need it for what? Weapons, AI, everything, Internet of Things, our whole lives.
It's
everything.
Speed is going to be so much quicker than currently we've got with 4G. And yes, we will live in that interconnected world. Now, the question is, are the United States right to be concerned? I mean, there is no evidence, so potentially you would say entirely they should not be concerned. However, can the United States trust that China will not get involved in Huawei in the future? Ultimately, this is a state in which it will be perfectly willing and able to take over a private company and intervene. And that is why the United States is concerned. But also, is there a wider battle here? Is this a zero-sum game for the United States? Is this a battle between two global superpowers about the future of the world? It is. And the United States is clearly concerned about losing and being not the top dog when it comes to technology.
Huawei is known to be ahead in terms of technology, but then look who's in the middle. Europe. The EU is in the middle. William, the EU is stuck. It has to make a choice, though, at some point.
Well, I think it would be better if the EU didn't make a choice, because in my opinion, the EU is likely to make the wrong choice.
Well, the US is asking it to make a choice.
But I mean, let's be clear. China has been pilfering technology from the West, particularly the United States, but not just the United States, for years and years and years and years and years and years. You actually mentioned a trade war. Well, basically, there is a massive deficit that the United States is running with China, which is probably unsustainable in the medium term. And if there is a trade war, the United States has actually lost it. Now, contrary to what my esteemed fellow contributor has said, I think that if the United States says that they have some concerns and they've got as better intelligence than anybody, with the possible exception of the Israelis, if the United States say that they have a concern about this, I think the concern has to be taken seriously, and there shouldn't just be a reflex anti-Americanism or anti-Trumpism. Okay. We have to think about it very, very carefully, and it's a very big question.
That's all good and well, but it's not good enough. I mean, Europe is in a desperate need to roll out our 5G networks across the continent now, and this is, if the US, encourage us to stifle 5G by banning Huawei from our networks infrastructure in Europe, it could really put us back a couple of years.
Economically, yeah.
And I mean, so the foundation of the American concerns are based on this 2017 Chinese cybersecurity law, which essentially says that if the Chinese government feel that there are national security threats, they can ask private companies to access their consumer data. Huawei have responded to that. They responded in November by saying there is no chance they would comply with such a request.
Yeah, Sam, we're not.
Okay.
But China is not. It doesn't operate by the rules that, let's say, the European Union and the United States do.
It complies with GDPR. I mean, Huawei complies with GDPR.
No, but I mean, if the Chinese government decided to intervene in Huawei, they will do. I mean, you know, it is essentially a communist, a totalitarian regime or an authoritarian regime. They are not going to concern themselves with protecting the rights of a private company.
On that note, let's bring in the response actually of the Chinese government, because yesterday reports emerged that Huawei is planning to sue the U.S. government for barring federal agencies from using their technology, and the Chinese government has also weighed in. Now, here's a spokesperson for the Chinese National People's Congress.
美国政府的一些官员拿国家情报法说事儿，渲染特定中国企业产品存在所谓安全风险，是以政治手段干预经济行为，违反世贸组织规则，干扰公平竞争的国际市场秩序，是典型的双重标准。 既不公正，也不道德。
I know you were talking about there, William, that if the United States expresses concern there, it must be legitimate. The Chinese are talking about double standards. Aren't the Americans just criticizing China for the very same thing that it is also criticized, you know, when it comes to security, when it comes to spying, when it comes to all that?
But there is a concern. There is a concern about Chinese spying. But I know I'm not here to ask questions. But what I would like to know, and you're an expert, is why the only possible supplier of 5G, and if it is the only possible supplier, why is it the only possible supplier? It seems to be incredibly worrying that the European Union can't provide, that there's no supplier in the EU that can supply.
It's not the only
5G.
supplier. But they do have masses of authority. They're investing millions and millions of euros into the European market as a means to encourage the rollout of 5G. And they're not the only player in the game. Of course they're not. And, you know, we could turn to Nokia, we could turn to Ericsson. They are one of the biggest. And if we want to, you know, pursue the 5G market with haste, you know, we've got to side with the biggest players in the game. And until the US come up with some evidence, I mean, what can the Commission do? What can the EU do? As a means to make a decision on whether they should be barred from the market or not.
And it's so deep in terms of investment, in terms of the technology. Huawei is very deeply into the EU market. It's really hard to just pull out just like that.
It is, and these are big questions, particularly for Eastern European countries like Hungary and Poland, who have sided up with Donald Trump, and they are very keen, very, very keen, the US administration, for them not to use Huawei. However, there is notable pressure that is coming to bear. So, for example, in the UK, Tessa, British Telecom have essentially are looking this deeply. Some would say under pressure actually from the British intelligence services, and Vodafone have started getting rid of some of their Huawei equipment as well that is already in existence. So clearly there is an awful lot of pressure from Washington, but be in no doubt this is not just about 5G, it's about a global battle for supremacy between the US and China.
I'll end with a very quick question, William, to you. Whom would you trust with control of your tech? The US or China?
US.
Okay, well, there you go. Very quick answer on that note. All right. Cybersecurity, it's not the only thing Europe seems to be squabbling over. They also can't decide which time zone they prefer. Well, that's despite agreeing that they only want one. Let's take a look. Summertime or wintertime? For years, it's been these guys who determine which one we're in. Every year, an hour forward, an hour back. And a little something for those who love the longer days and those who prefer an extra hour in bed. But soon, Europe will have to commit.
Un vote attendu.
MEPs have voted to end the biannual time change after 84% of Europeans surveyed said it was a waste of time. The change won't come into effect until 2021, and with the EU offering countries the choice of summertime or wintertime, the whole thing could get a bit messy. Very important issue, isn't it, William?
Well, it's more important than a lot of things that we discuss, actually. Look, there has been this change from wintertime to summertime over the years, and actually for pretty good reasons. And I don't see that the reasons have particularly changed. And I think that the arguments for retaining what we have are probably stronger than the arguments for change.
Is that an argument that Britain will not change and could have a different time zone from the rest of Europe?
But we do anyway.
No, but I mean from like Ireland, for example, the Irish.
Well, I think it's for Ireland to decide what it is that they want to do.
Would you prefer,
I wouldn't presume to tell the Irish what's a good idea.
Summer, winter time. Summer, winter.
No, I quite like the change. I think it's really important.
Okay.
Because the whole point is the light changes during the day, and it does, under all estimations, help save lives.
I just want more sun.
I'm a big supporter of time change.
More sun, more sun.
Also,
Brussels needs more sun.
It's great
all right.
when you think that you get an extra hour in bed.
Okay, well, we're going to go to a break first on Raw Politics, and afterwards, as Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez dissolves Parliament ahead of snap elections, far-right lawmakers look set to enter Parliament for the first time in nearly 4 decades. Welcome back to Our Politics. Now, he came to power on the promise of a break with the past, a fresh start after years of corruption, and as a peacemaker when it came to the question of the Catalan separatists. But now, just 9 months after taking power, Spain's leader, Pedro Sanchez, has dissolved parliament and faces snap elections. He's criticized for failing to quell the anger of pro-independence leaders as nationalism tightens its grip on Spain. Now, but even with early polls suggesting that Mr. Sanchez could do well on April 28th, a clear majority is unlikely. And with me now in the studio to discuss this is Ana Miranda, a Spanish MEP. She sits with the Greens EFA group here in the Parliament. We also have Beatriz Rios, a reporter with Euractiv. And still with us, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. All right, Sanchez actually has this title. I was reading it. He becomes the leader of the shortest-lived administration in modern Spain. Well, that's not a title that anyone would like. But given the snap election that he's facing, what strategy is Sanchez employing now?
I think he's preparing a strategy to have the majority, but the problem is that
he can't. I mean,
in any polls, he has not the majority at the moment, no. But he can win the elections in numbers. But I'm not sure if he can have a government because he needs some alliance with Podemos and also with the left parties, left nationalist parties like my party.
Before he was working with Catalan separatist parties as well?
And I think the majority can be very weak. And also, he's very open for the Catalan question, more open than Rajoy, but the Catalan question is not resolved.
Sure.
So he has a lot of problems to be again, but he's in the polls #1.
He is trying to create this balancing act, and as you say, it's very hard for him to create a majority. What would this election be fought on, and what would be the impact of the far right on this?
Well, I think Sanchez is aware of the importance of that particular divide, and he's actually positioning himself as the opposition to the far right. He's pursuing a lot of social policies before leaving power, and he's trying to make himself like the opposition to the far right because he knows what's at stake. And I think the problem here is because he might not have majority, we might have a socialist winning, but then we would depend on the formation of a government, and there the far right might have more allies, even if
But will that work?
Surprising.
Why would you position yourself as the opposition of the far right when we can see a surge in surge is a big word, but we can see a support for the far right in some areas of Spain?
Because I have the feeling that when it comes to elections in Spain, what we see often is that the left tends more to abstain, but when there is a threat, they go to the polls. So what he is trying to show is that we have the threat of the far right, and that we need to go vote for social Spain and vote for progress.
Is that a smart strategy?
Well,
the threat of the far right?
Well, and this comes back to the conversation that we're having at the start of the programme about Macron, because we've been talking about the rise of populism throughout Europe over the last couple of years, and undoubtedly that has happened. Voters have flocked, particularly to far-right parties, and we look at Spain, we look at Vox, who I think raised €200,000 in 2 days this week, which is very impressive, and they're over 10% in the polls. But don't forget, there is also a constituent out there who do not like the rise of populism, who actually are on the centrist or on the left who are pro-European, who are socially concerned and a bit more internationalist. And this election, and it will be fascinating, the Spanish election, because it will come a month ahead of
just before the European elections, yeah.
That what we might see is kind of a backlash against the backlash. So a backlash from the centre and the Liberals against the rise of populism.
So, Anna, how do you think, how closely will this be watched and what impact will it have on the European elections?
I think the impact could be very, very big because if Sanchez can win the elections, if the far right is down, maybe we have more diversity in the European Parliament. But if the results of Vox, they are very big, we have a problem
Vox,
here. Because,
the far-right party,
yes,
yeah.
because the far-right can be in the place of our Democrats parties. We have Vox tomorrow in the European Parliament. That is a scandal, because it's a kind of electoral
but they were elected. I mean, they were elected, Vox. So, why, don't they deserve a platform as well?
Yeah, they were elected in Andalusia, but they are not elected here. And the problem is that the person that is coming tomorrow, he has a prosecution order in the United Kingdom. So how the Parliament can agree with an act like this?
Can I just ask a really quick question about how much you think the Catalonia question will play a part in the Spanish elections? Because that's clearly behind some of the support for Vox.
Yeah, indeed.
We don't have much time, but please go ahead.
I think it's going to be a major issue, and I think it's been formed into a major issue by the political parties, whereas we should be talking about other important issues in Spain, like unemployment, for instance. But we're framing the elections.
Clearly, the dividing line's clear. And whether it's in Spain or the European Union or in France, it's all being similar on the rise of populism and otherwise. All right. After the break on Raw Politics, we want to know this question. What's the one issue that would get you to the polls in the European elections? And after Macron's open letter today, does Europe need saving? Those are just some of the hot topics for Raw Politics. Your call tonight, and here is how you can get in touch. Our lines are open, and coming up, we will preview tonight's debate. Do stay with us.
If you have diversity in your management team, if you have diversity in your board of directors, you have a better organization.
Yeah, I mean, Viktor Orban, his view, and obviously it's shared by a lot of Hungarian voters, is that politics is just too brutal.
I feel sometimes that we can no longer even make a joke.
Did Russia escape justice, do you think?
So it could have been done by anyone.
Yeah, and this is exactly what I think Russia thrives on.
This could just be a simple case of ignorance.
So that's just some of the highlights from the last episode of Your Call. And now you saw there people from across Europe having their say on the day's top stories. And now it is your turn. Your Call is coming up at 7 p.m. CET or 6 p.m. if you are in the UK. And here's what we're going to be talking about. Never has Europe been in such danger. That's the warning from French President Emmanuel Macron as he calls for a Europe renaissance in an open letter. A mass retreat into nationalism. That's his fear. But what do you think? Does the EU need saving? And make no mistake, Macron's letter is an election pitch. His proposals included everything from a European-wide minimum wage to a food safety force to an EU borders agency to address migration. But that's his vision. We want to know, what would make you vote in the EU elections? And welcome to the new arms race. No guns to be seen, just the phone in your pocket. The US and China are battling to own the next tech revolution, 5G. And Europe is caught in the middle. So, the US or China? Whom do you trust to control your tech? Have your say, Europe. Does the EU need saving? What would make you vote in the EU elections? And the US or China? Whom do you trust to control your tech? Well, all of the contact information is on your screen now. You can call us for free at 00800 3333 7002. Send us an email at rawpoll@euronews.com or look for us on social media. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics and look for us on Skype as well. And with us now to discuss this is Linnea Engström, a Swedish MEP with the Greens EFA Group, And still with us, Beatrice Rios with Euractiv and Darren McCaffrey. All right, let's talk about whether the EU needs to be saved. Linnea, you wanted to talk about this. Does the EU need to be saved?
I think so, yes. I think the EU needs to be saved.
Saved from itself?
Yeah, no, but saved altogether. I mean, with Brexit, with people sort of mobilizing on the streets, with Greta Thunberg and, well, Yellow Vest as well. I'm not sure that Macron is the one.
I was just going to ask, is France and Macron
I'm not sure
answer
that it's going to be Macron who saves the EU.
Why not?
I like his policies, the one he sort of presented today in some bits, but I think we need this kind of mobilization from the grassroots. That's what I think.
The problem is that actual Emmanuel Macron is a very good communicator.
Yeah, he is.
And the problem is that actually the problem for Europe is that all the best communicators have been Eurosceptic and populist, and there are very few very strong, charismatic advocates for the European Union.
Yes,
I'm not suggesting. Of course, I'm not suggesting you are. But, you're on
the other side, but
the charismatic side.
But obviously, we want to know what will get you to vote at the European Parliament elections. That's one of the other questions that we're asking. What would make you go to the polls? What is the most important issue for you? And do join us. Linnea will be there tonight at your call. And so do join us in the debate. So I want to ask, when we're talking about the EU getting saved, it's almost like, because Macron is painting the populist and nationalist as a problem. I mean, you would agree with that, Linnea, but anyone who would vote on the other side would say, well, why are you calling us a problem? We had Fox on the show before, and they had a problem with them being called a problem. So,
but that's the thing. I mean, if you want to make people vote, you have also to give them some positive encouragement to go to vote. If you're only opposing something bad into something good, then you might have people that are not so sure about that divide. You need to give them also some positive vibes about the EU as well. And I don't think we're doing that so much.
And also, obviously, people would argue that they want to save Europe, and the best way to save Europe is not by having the European Union.
Yeah,
exactly. And that is an argument we have to understand. No, but we have to understand that there are tens of millions of people on this continent who have in recent years actually expressed the strong dislike the direction of the European Union.
I think we're very vulnerable. As progressives, as liberals, we're very vulnerable to this threat rhetorics. But we have to provide something else.
I mean, this debate is going to go on. So again, join us tonight and do call in with your point of view. And all the ways to get in touch, there's several of that. You can find it on your screen now. You can call us for free. Again, it's 00800 3333 7002. Send us an email. We're all watching it. rawpoll@euronews.com, or use the hashtag #RawPolitics on Twitter, Facebook, and even Instagram. I'm also checking that one. Or look for us on Skype. Right, before we go tonight, we have time for Raw Moment, 2 hours and 2 minutes. That's how long Donald Trump spent on stage last night as he delivered the longest speech of his presidency, featuring his best impressions and favorite one-liners. Let's take a look.
This speech should have been delivered 1 year from now, not now, damn it. Because they're going to get together, they're going to say, this guy's really laying for us. And as you know, the Attorney General says, I'm going to recuse myself. The Green New Deal, right? Green New Deal. I encourage it. I think it's really something that they should promote. No planes. No energy. When the wind stops blowing, that's the end of your electric. Let's hurry up. Darling? Darling, is the wind blowing today? I'd like to watch television, darling.
It's like a guilty pleasure.
We're all
guilty pleasure.
It's not just a guilty pleasure. Actually, everyone who goes to these rallies, and I have to say I've never been to them, they say the one thing that doesn't necessarily get conveyed, it did there, is that he's actually quite funny.
He's funny.
He is funny.
But I'm sad he's a politician.
That's the problem. It's what you were saying before. We need people who connect with the electorate.
If you want to have a laugh,
he's a stand-up comedian.
Don't just watch his speech, read them.
See the reaction that he gets.
On paper, it's even funnier than it is.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight on Raw Politics. Again, don't forget to call us at your call after the show. Have a good evening.